I became a teacher to save the world one kid at a time. I know how that sounds. Naive, grandiose, maybe even delusional. But I believed it with the fervor of the recently converted. After all, it had happened to me. My childhood was a cliché of urban decay, absent parents, empty refrigerators, and the kind of neighborhood where gunshots were ambient noise. Mr. Mazafield changed everything. He wasn't just my 11th grade English teacher. He was the first adult who looked at me and saw potential instead of another statistic. When I got arrested for shoplifting, he showed up at the precinct. When I couldn't afford college application fees, he paid them himself. When I graduated with my teaching degree, he was in the front row, crying harder than my own mother. So when I signed up for Teach Corps, a program that placed educators in underserved communities, I expected to become someone else's Mr. Maysfield. I imagined inner-city schools with metal detectors and kids who'd understand my references, my struggles, my story. The placement letter arrived on a humid Tuesday in July. I'd been assigned to Deer Chase, West Virginia. Population 287. The nearest Walmart 73 miles away. I had to look it up on 3 different maps before I found it. A pinprick in the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by nothing but forest and the occasional holler, those narrow valleys that slice between mountains like scars. The information packet included a letter from the principal, Don Fry, written in the careful script of someone who'd learned penmanship when it still mattered. Dear future educator, welcome to Deer Chase. I want to prepare you for what you'll find here. We are isolated in ways that city folks often find challenging. The nearest gas station is an hour's drive. In winter, snow makes our roads impassable for weeks. Spring brings floods. Summer brings copperheads and timber rattlers. Cell service is spotty at best. But we take care of our own here. The school provides housing. A small but comfortable home, 3 doors down from the main building. The community will embrace you if you let them. Our students are eager to learn, respectful, and kind. Many of our visiting teachers choose to extend their contracts. Your predecessor, Michelle Hardesty, spoke highly of her time here. I'm sure she'll be in touch to share her experiences. Looking forward to meeting you. Principal Don Fry. Michelle never did get in touch. Her single email was 3 sentences long. Dear Chase is great. The kids are wonderful. You'll love it. No phone number. No video chat. When I replied with questions, I got nothing back. I should have seen that as a warning. But I was 22, desperate to start my career, and terrified that backing out would get me blacklisted from the program. So I loaded my dying Honda Civic with everything I owned and started the 14-hour drive into the mountains. The rest stop where I spent the night was a mistake. Every overhead light blazed with the intensity of an interrogation room, turning the empty parking lot into a stage. Truckers emerged from their rigs like actors from the wings, performed their biological necessities, and disappeared again. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a scraping sound against my door. Metal on metal, deliberate and searching. By the time I shot upright, whatever it was had vanished, leaving only the memory of violation. I drove the rest of the way in the dark, watching the sun rise over mountains that looked like sleeping giants covered in green blankets. The GPS lost signal around Beckley, leaving me with handwritten directions and a growing sense of disconnection from the world I knew. The gas station where I stopped to ask for directions looked like a museum exhibit. Wood-paneled walls, a mechanical cash register, and shelves stocked with equal parts groceries and taxidermy supplies. 3 old men occupied the counter stools, like gargoyles on a cathedral, motionless until I entered, then suddenly unnervingly animate. Blink Hollow Road? The one with the tobacco-stained beard squinted at me. You missed it. Few miles back. Signs grown over, and the turn comes up quick. Looks more like a deer path than a road, if you want the truth. You heading down for the fishing? Asked the large one in overalls. Teaching, I said, then immediately wished I hadn't. They exchanged looks, quick, loaded glances that carried entire conversations. Teaching, the bearded one repeated, like he was tasting the word. Well then, you'll want to be careful down there. The third man, who hadn't spoken yet, suddenly laughed. Don't want to come back with the deer chase stare. The large man's hand shot out, gripping his companion's wrist. That ain't funny, Carl. What's the deer chase stare? I asked. Another exchange of glances. The bearded one stood, threw money on the counter. Nothing. Carl's been drinking since breakfast. You be sure to get out of there before dark. First few days especially. Takes time to adjust to mountain ways. They left together, a unified front against further questions. The clerk, a woman with peroxide hair and tired eyes, rang up my coffee without meeting my gaze. They're not wrong, though, she said quietly. About getting out before dark? Blink Hollow Road was exactly where they'd said, hidden behind a curtain of kudzu and resembling nothing so much as a gap between teeth. The descent into the valley felt like being swallowed. The road spiraled down through forest so dense, the noon sun became twilight. Every few hundred yards, rusted mailboxes marked invisible driveways that disappeared into the green darkness. Some had names: Wiggins, Smoot, Delcraw. Others just had numbers, or nothing at all. The trees thinned, the road leveled, and suddenly Deer Chase spread before me, like something from a fever dream. A handful of brick buildings clustered around a creek, a general store, a church with a tilting steeple, a garage that might have been abandoned, and the school. Beyond them, houses scattered like thrown dice, each one pressed against the forest, as if the trees were trying to reclaim them. But it was the silence that struck me first. No lawnmowers, no music, no dogs barking, just the creek mumbling to itself and the weight of all those watching mountains. The house the school provided sat on Maple Street, though I saw no maples, only sycamores with their skin peeling off in sheets like psoriasis. It was small, white, well-maintained. The key was under the mat, just as promised. Inside, donated furniture, mismatched but clean, a kitchen stocked with anonymous casseroles, their makers identified only by masking tape labels. Welcome from the Witt family. The Solars hope you like pot roast. Katie's famous green beans. Careful, they're addictive. That word, addictive, would come back to haunt me. As I unpacked, I felt watched, not metaphorically, literally observed. Every window in every house seemed to contain a shadow, a suggestion of a face. When I waved at one, the curtain fell back into place. That night, trying to sleep in the profound darkness that only exists far from cities, I heard my first hint of what was to come. Footsteps in the backyard, multiple sets, moving with purpose along what I'd later learn was one of many paths into the forest. They paused outside my window. I held my breath, certain they could hear my hammering heart. Then they continued on, and the night swallowed them whole. Principal Don Fry materialized on my porch the next morning like he'd been conjured. A thin man with a face like beef jerky and clothes that belonged in a daguerreotype tape. Suspenders, cotton shirt, a straw hat that had seen better decades. "You're the new blood?" he said, offering a hand that felt like holding a bundle of sticks. "Don't settling in?" We talked while he smoked a pipe that smelled of cherry tobacco and something else, something organic and wrong. He pointed out the important landmarks. Tom Minton's Goods and Sundry. Ruth runs it now. Tom died last spring. The Baptist Church. Reverend Whittle want to know if you're saved. The garage. Cecil Solar can fix anything with an engine. Michelle told you about the paths, I assume? He gestured at my backyard, where a clearly worn trail disappeared into the forest. She didn't tell me anything. We never actually spoke. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Well, there are old trails. Indians, then moonshiners, now hunters. You'll hear folks using them at night sometimes. Nothing to worry about. Before I could ask why hunters would need trails at night, he was gone, leaving only the lingering smell of that strange tobacco. The weeks before school started passed in a blur of aggressive hospitality. Every day brought new visitors with casseroles and questions. Where was I from? Was I married? Baptist or Methodist? Did I hunt? Did I have any medical conditions? That last one, asked by at least 4 different people, seemed odd, but I attributed it to small-town nosiness. Only Ruth Minton, who ran the general store, kept her distance. She was young, maybe 25, with red hair and a way of looking at me like I was already a ghost. When I tried to make conversation, she retreated into monosyllables in the store's back room. Once, I caught her staring at me with something like pity. "Did you know Michelle?" I asked one day. "Yeah." "What was she like?" Ruth's hands stilled on the register. "She was like you, full of ideas about making a difference." She handed me my change. "That'll be $23.50. Did she? $23.50. Ruth repeated, louder. Behind me, the bell jangled. Cecil Solar and his son stood in the doorway, not entering, just watching. Ruth's face went pale. "We were just talking about Michelle," I said to Cecil, trying to diffuse whatever tension I'd stumbled into. "Michelle." Cecil rolled the name around his mouth. "Lovely girl. Shame she had to leave so sudden. Family emergency, wasn't it, Don?" I hadn't heard Principal Fry enter, but there he was, pipe in hand, smile carved into his face, like someone had put it there with a knife. "That's right. Her mother took ill. These things happen." He put a hand on my shoulder. The weight of it was all wrong, too heavy for such a thin man. "You want to get home. Looks like rain." It wasn't raining. The sky was crystalline, but I understood the dismissal. Walking home, I noticed something else. There were no teenagers anywhere. Not one. In a town this small, you'd expect to see them lounging by the creek, smoking behind the church, doing whatever bored kids do in places with nothing to do. But Deer Chase's youth had vanished as completely as Michelle. September 1st arrived with yellow buses groaning down from the haulers, delivering their cargo of adolescence. The transformation was instant. Deer Chase went from ghost town to something almost normal. Kids shouted, laughed, shoved each other playfully. They looked healthy, well-adjusted, happy, too happy, I'd realize later. But that first morning, relief overwhelmed suspicion. My first period was junior English. 17 faces, all white, all smiling, all weirdly eager for a Tuesday morning. Derek Witt, the Reverend's son, tall and golden, like a scarecrow made of sunshine. Susie Perkins, with her long ponytail, and laugh like breaking glass. Others, whose names I'd learn soon enough. Jason, Amanda, Tyler, Madison. All of them practically vibrating with an energy that seemed chemical. We were 15 minutes into an icebreaker activity. 2 truths and a lie. When it happened, Derek was mid-sentence. Something about having a pet raccoon, when he simply stopped. Not like he'd forgotten what he was saying, like someone had hit pause on a video. His mouth hung open, one hand raised to gesture at something that would never be indicated. Spit began to collect on his lower lip. Then I realized they'd all stopped. 17 teenagers frozen in position, some mid-laugh, others mid-step. Amanda's hand hung in the air where she'd been tucking hair behind her ear. Tyler had been bending to tie his shoe. He remained folded in half, one hand on his laces, the other splayed for balance. Very funny, I said. You can stop now. Nothing. I waved my hand in front of Derek's face. His eyes didn't track it, didn't blink. I could see the blood vessels in them, the way his pupils had dilated unevenly, left larger than right. This isn't funny anymore. Still nothing. Saliva dripped from Derek's mouth onto his desk. Madison's raised arm began to tremble. A muscle in Tyler's back visibly spasmed, rippling beneath his shirt like something trying to escape. I grabbed the classroom phone, dialed the office. It rang and rang. I stuck my head into the hallway, empty, silent, wrong. The entire school had gone quiet as a held breath. 6 minutes. That's how long it lasted. 6 minutes of standing among those breathing statues, watching their bodies rebel against positions they couldn't change, seeing the terror building in their fixed eyes because, and this was the worst part, I was certain they were aware. Somewhere behind those frozen faces, 17 teenagers were screaming. Then, like nothing had happened, Derek finished his sentence. Named Bandit, and he could open doors with his little hands. Everyone laughed. Madison lowered her arm. Tyler finished tying his shoe. Mr. B? Susie was looking at me with concern that didn't reach her eyes. You okay? You're really pale. Did you just... Just what? Derek asked. But there was something in his voice, a tightness, that suggested he knew exactly what. The phone rang. Principal Fry. Did you call? Everything all right? Everything's fine. I heard myself say. That afternoon, I overheard Derek and Susie whispering by the lockers. I caught fragments. Saw it. Told you he'd notice. Happening more often. Tell Fry. They saw me and fell silent. Derek smiled, all teeth. Great class today, Mr. B. Really great. It happened again that Friday. This time, I was watching for it. 3:17 p.m., the buses idling, students streaming out of the building. Then, like someone had thrown a switch, every teenager stopped, but not the adults. The bus drivers looked bored. Principal Fry stood in his doorway, checking his watch. Mrs. Henley, the math teacher, continued writing on her clipboard. I grabbed her arm. Don't you see what's happening? She looked at the frozen students, then at me, with the patient expression of someone dealing with a slow child. See what, dear? They're not moving. Sometimes it takes them a minute to wake up after a long day. You'll get used to our mountain ways. Mountain ways. the same phrase the old men at the gas station had used. When the students reanimated 4 minutes later, I was watching Derek. For just a second, as consciousness flooded back into his face, I saw terror. Pure, undiluted terror. Then it was gone, replaced by that same too bright smile. That night, I lay awake listening to footsteps on the path behind my house. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Teenage voices, whisper laughing. I crept to the window, peered through the blinds. 5 shadows moved past, heading into the forest. One paused, turned back. It was Susie Perkins. She looked directly at my window, directly at me, and smiled. Then she followed the others into the darkness. I should have left then, packed my car, driven away, blacklist be damned. But 2 things kept me there: curiosity and the growing certainty that Michelle Hardesty had never left Deer Chase at all. Her emails to the program, I discovered through careful questioning, always came from the same IP address, the McDonald's at the highway exit, according to a tech-savvy friend who traced it for me. Someone was driving an hour just to send emails, pretending to be Michelle. Why? Ruth Minton knew something. I could see it in the way she watched me, the way she'd started leaving newspapers on my porch with articles circled, missing persons cases, all from within 50 miles, all young adults who'd moved away suddenly. One evening, I cornered her in the store after closing. What happened to Michelle? She was counting the till, didn't look up. I told you, she left. No, she didn't. The bills crumpled in her fist. You need to leave. Tonight. I'll drive you myself. Not until you tell me what's going on. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. My grandfather knew. He made us promise never to go into the woods at night, never to follow the old paths, never to feed like the others. Do you know what it's like, being the only one in town who won't, being looked at like you're diseased? Feed on what? The store's door chimed. Cecil Solar and 3 other men entered, moving with the casual coordination of a hunting pack. Ruth was just closing up, Cecil said. It wasn't a question. We were talking, I said. No, Cecil replied. You were leaving. They escorted me out, 1 on each side, 1 behind. At my door, Cecil leaned close. His breath smelled like Principal Fry's pipe cherry tobacco and that organic wrongness. You're a smart boy. Smart enough to know when to stop asking questions. Michelle wasn't that smart. That night, I didn't wait for the footsteps. I was already hiding in the garden when they came. 5 teenagers, including Derek and Susie. I followed them into the forest. The path was older than I'd imagined, worn smooth by countless feet over who knows how many years. It branched and merged with other paths, all leading deeper into the woods, all heading down. The teenagers moved without flashlights, navigating by moonlight and memory. The forest changed as we descended. The trees grew more twisted, their bark scaled like reptile skin. The air thickened, became soup-humid and full of chittering insects. Somewhere in the darkness, something large crashed through the underbrush. A deer, maybe, or something that had once been a deer. The path ended at a pond that looked like the earth's infected wound. Black water skinned with algae, shores of sucking mud, and in the center, a dead tree that had become something else, something that pulsed with faint green light. The teenagers approached it reverently. As I watched from behind a cluster of rocks, they began to harvest things from its bark. Insects, I realized, though unlike any I'd ever seen. They glowed with their own phosphorescence, tick-like but wrong, their bodies pulsing in rhythm with something I couldn't hear but could feel in my bones. Susie helped her younger sister Katie, who I hadn't noticed was with them, select one of the creatures. At the base of the skull, she instructed, "It hurts less there." Katie whimpered but complied, pressing the thing to her neck. Her face contorted, then relaxed into an expression of such profound bliss that it was obscene on a 14-year-old face. One by one, they all took their communion. Then they began to dance. No, that's not right. They began to move in ways that human bodies shouldn't move. Joints bending wrongly, spines undulating like snakes, their faces cycling through expressions of ecstasy and agony. So quickly, they blurred together. Derek threw his head back and screamed, not in pain, but in a joy so intense it had circled back around to anguish. The others joined him, their voices harmonizing in frequencies that made my teeth ache. Then they scattered into the forest, moving like the deer I'd seen, or the things that had once been deer, crashing through the underbrush without regard for path or direction, chasing something only they could perceive. I approached the tree. Up close, I could see it wasn't dead, but transformed. Its bark moved like skin, breathing. The insects. I could see now they weren't insects at all, but something between animal and fungus, scuttled over its surface in complex patterns that hurt to follow. I understood then. The freezing episodes weren't side effects. They were withdrawal. The perfect happiness of the students wasn't natural. It was chemical. The town's secret wasn't just drug use. It was something far older, far stranger. The tree pulsed, the things on its surface oriented toward me like compass needles finding north. One detached, began moving down the trunk toward my hand. I ran. I made it home just before dawn, my clothes torn, my skin covered in cuts from branches and thorns. Principal Fry was sitting on my porch. Curiosity, he said, can be a dangerous thing. Those things, what are they? Old, he replied. Older than the town, older than the settlements before the town. The indigenous people knew about them, used them in moderation. We've refined the practice. You're drugging children. We're surviving. His voice hardened. Do you know what happens to towns like ours? They dry up, blow away. The kids leave for cities and never come back. But here they stay. They finish school. They go to regional colleges. They come home because they need what only we can provide. And if they try to leave, why would they leave? But his smile said everything. Michelle tried to leave. Michelle was confused. She forgot what was important. But her parents still get emails, still know she's happy somewhere. That's what matters, that people believe in happiness, even if they can't see it. You killed her. I didn't do anything. The woods are dangerous at night. People get lost, fall into old mine shafts, drown in flooded quarries. Tragic accidents happen all the time. He stood, knocked his pipe against the porch rail. The tobacco fell in clumps that looked disturbingly organic. You have a choice, son. You can be smart, finish your contract, leave quietly when it's done. Or you can be like Michelle, confused, accidental, tragic. The woods are so dangerous at night. I tried to leave that day. My car wouldn't start. Sugar in the gas tank, Cecil informed me with false sympathy. It would take weeks to get parts. I tried to call for help, but the phone lines were down. A tree had fallen, apparently. These things happen in the mountains. That night, they came for me. Not violently. Principal Fry, Reverend Witt, Cecil, and half the town's adults, all smiling, all explaining how much easier things would be if I just tried to understand. They held me down gently, apologetically. Susie approached with one of those pulsing things cupped in her palm. "It doesn't hurt," she promised. "And after, you'll understand why we do this, why we have to do this." The thing touched my neck. Its legs, dozens of them, hair thin and sharp, found purchase in my skin. Then it bit, or stung, or whatever you call it when something violates the boundary between self and other. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every neuron fired at once, pleasure and pain becoming meaningless distinctions in the face of pure sensation. I saw colors that don't exist, heard music made of geometry, felt my consciousness scatter into a million pieces, each one experiencing its own perfect moment. When I came back, hours later, days later, I never knew I was different. Not changed exactly, but aware of an absence, a new hunger that hadn't been there before. The young feel it strongest. Principal Fry explained later. By 25, the effect fades. By 30, it's just pleasant dreams and a mild rash. That's why we need the children. They experience it fully, perfectly. And in exchange, we protect them, keep them safe, keep them here. It's monstrous. It's symbiosis. The things on the tree, they need us too. Need our chemistry, our electricity. We feed them, they feed us. Circle of life. I became part of the circle. Not by choice. The hunger the first dose created was unbearable. I found myself on the paths at night. Found myself at the tree. Found myself pressing those terrible, wonderful things to my skin and dissolving into sensation. The students' freezing episodes made sense now. When withdrawal hit, consciousness simply stepped out for a while, unable to bear the absence. We all froze, all of us who'd fed, our minds retreating to some shared space where the hunger couldn't follow. I taught my classes in a haze. My students liked me. I was one of them now, marked by the same need. We never spoke of it during school hours, but sometimes a student would catch my eye and smile, and I'd know they were thinking of the tree, the dance, the dissolution. Ruth watched it happen with disgust and pity. She was the only clean one, the only one who'd never fed, and the town barely tolerated her. Her grandfather's store was all that kept her safe. That, and the fact that someone needed to deal with the outside world, to maintain the fiction that Deer Chase was just another dying mountain town. "You could leave," she told me once. "Dried away and never come back. The hunger fades after a few months." Michelle told me that. Before. Before what? But she wouldn't say. Spring came late to the mountains. With it came floods that washed out the lower roads and revealed things better left buried. Michelle Hardisty's car was found first, pushed off a bend in Blink Hollow Road, her body still seatbelted inside. She'd been trying to leave. Someone had run her off the road. Ruth Minton disappeared the next day. Her truck was found in the creek a week later, but her body took longer to surface. She'd been weighted down with chains, wrapped in plastic like something you'd store in a freezer. The state police came, asked questions. The town had answers. Michelle had been depressed. Ruth had been unstable. Small towns, they said, sometimes people just break. But I knew the truth. They'd tried to leave. And in Deer Chase, leaving wasn't an option. Once you'd seen the tree, once you knew the secret, the only way out was in a body bag or in careful doses, managing the hunger until it finally faded. I chose the doses. 3 more years I stayed, teaching, feeding, freezing. The hunger never went away, just became manageable, like chronic pain. My students loved me. I was the teacher who understood, who knew what they were going through, who could help them manage the cycles of need and satisfaction. Some tried to resist. Katie Perkins, Susie's sister, decided she wanted to go to college out of state. She made it as far as the highway before the withdrawal hit. They found her car wrapped around the tree, her body contorted in positions that suggested she'd been trying to crawl out of her own skin. Tragic accident. Principal Fry said at the memorial, "The mountain roads are so dangerous." By 25, the venom barely affected me anymore. Just a warm feeling and vivid dreams. The town let me go. I was no use to them anymore. Too old to properly feed. Too young to help manage the system. I left on a Tuesday morning. My replacement already moved into the house on Maple Street. Another young idealist ready to save the world one kid at a time. "Take care," Principal Fry said, shaking my hand at the town limits. "Remember, some things are better left buried. Some stories better left untold." I nodded, smiled, lied. I teach in Cleveland now. My students think I'm spacey. I still have episodes where time slips, where I'm back at the tree, feeling that terrible communion. The hunger never fully went away. Sometimes I dream of phosphorescent insects, of dancing in the woods, of a happiness so pure it makes normal joy feel like shadow. I've tried to report it, but who would believe me? A tree that grows drug-producing parasites, a town that feeds its children to addiction to keep them from leaving. It sounds like delusion, like a breakdown, like the kind of thing that gets you committed rather than investigated. But I know the truth. Deer Chase is still there, still feeding, still freezing. Every year, a new teacher arrives, full of hope. Every year, the cycle continues. Last week, I got an email from my replacement. 3 sentences. "Deer Chase is amazing. The students are so engaged. Thanks for all your notes." I never left any notes. I've been thinking about driving back, just to check, just to see. The hunger whispers that it would be safe now, that I'm too old to be truly trapped, that maybe just one more taste wouldn't hurt. But then I remember Michelle's car in the ravine, Ruth's body in the creek, Katie's hands clawing at her throat as the withdrawal consumed her. And I remember something else, last night, on my pillow, glowing faintly in the darkness. A single phosphorescent insect, legs moving in that terribly familiar pattern, reaching for my skin. They know where I am. They've always known. The hunger never lets you go. It just waits, patient as mountains, certain as the paths that lead down, always down, to the tree that breathes in the darkness, offering communion to anyone young enough to truly taste damnation. I should run, pack everything, disappear, become someone else. But I can hear them outside my window now, footsteps on a path that shouldn't exist in Cleveland, voices I recognize, whispering my name, promising an end to the hunger that's been eating me alive for 3 years. The door is opening. They've come to take me home.